Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Sonic Academy. My name's Nate, and it's that time of the year again where we have a brand new Cubase update available to us. We're looking at Cubase 11, and me being the resident Cubase fanboy here at Sonic Academy, I've been tasked with showing you guys some of the new features and checking out this latest update. Let's dive in and have a look. Right, so let's check this out. We've got a bunch of great new workflow updates in version 11. At first glance, not like major changes, but some of these, for me at least, were pretty groundbreaking and massive time savers. There's a couple of new plugins and stuff as well that we're going to check out. First thing I'm going to dive into, though, is the updated export audio window, which for me is one of the highlights of this release. I've just opened up a couple of audio tracks, instrument tracks, group tracks here just to demonstrate this. And then I've got a few cycle markers open as well. Coincidentally, one of the cool things that they've added with the cycle markers now, if you right click on a cycle marker channel, you can select show marker lines from active marker track or from all marker tracks, and we'll actually drop the lines down for you so that when you're working at the bottom of a project, you'll know from before you'd have to check where these cycle markers were. This is really easy to see where they are now just by dropping them all the way down. They can be colorized as well. Very nice little workflow enhancement. But let's jump into the export window because this is quite a nice feature that they've added. So some of this looks familiar, but they've overhauled most of this now, and we're going to take a look at some of these new features. The biggest one being the fact that they've added queues, job queues to this now. And I'm going to show you how this works. We'll kind of just look through some of the sections here. They've updated this much cleaner looking interface now. There's a very nice feature with this when you're in multiple mode. You can go and check the multiple channels that you want to export. You can also link it to your project file. So if you come into the arrange page, let's say you want to do an export of audio 2, 3, instrument 3, and let's say group 4, 3 and 4. If we come back to this one now, we can link the two together, and you'll see you'll just get the channels that you want to export available to you here. So that's handy to have, especially with big projects. We'll go back to single now. This is all relatively the same as far as the naming structure goes. This is, as always, a super cool feature in Cubase. They have also added a really cool feature to the path now. Instead of having to save to the project audio folder or the just chosen folder that you choose yourself, you now have this project mixdown folder. What this does is it actually contains everything inside of your project folder. So you have the Cubase project, your audio folder, and then this will create a special mixdown folder that will actually contain all the mixdowns that you put in there, should you choose to do so. Alternatively, you also have an option down here at the bottom when you choose what to do after the export. You have a few new things here open in Wavelab for mastering if you're doing mastering in Wavelab. You can create a new project, which is also really nice. Let's say you're going to do a stems export. You can actually create a new project immediately after those stems have been done, and then do a stem mix from there as well. You can import them into a new audio track or insert into pool. And if you have the insert into pool selected, you can actually create a folder automatically inside of the pool window, which is really nice for keeping everything nice and organized as well. Now let's take a look at how the jobs work, because this is a huge time saver. For me personally, a lot of the time I need to export stems of tracks once they're finished. I also often, when it comes to mastering, I have to export different formats as well for clients and for myself. So you have presets that you can now set up here. I've set up a few, like a CD master. We have a 16-bit version. We have like a 24-bit FLAC for Spotify, for example. And you can save presets that you want in here. And pretty much everything that we do here flows down to the job queue, which I'm going to show you now. So let's say we're going to do a single stereo out of our mix, and we're going to do that as a CD master. We'll add that to the queue. Then let's say we want to do a stem mix. We can go to multiple, and let's do our stems, all our groups. And we're going to do our stems at, let's say, 24-bit. we can decide what we want to do with these. Let's say we're going to create a new project from our stems. And let's also, we'll add this to the queue. And then we can also decide that we want to disable all the effects, so we can do a second pass in our stems, that dry stems completely. And let's say we are working with multi-samples. For instance, we want to create a multi-sample patch. So we've done some sampling and we've set up our cycle markers. We can select our cycle markers, and we'll do the cycle markers for our instrument tracks only, seeing as we're sampling those. And we can then go and set up the naming schemes. We can add the cycle marker ID like it currently is here. You'll see it will feed into the track names there. And then let's decide that we want this to be in the project mixdown folder, and we'll insert that into pool, and we'll say multi-samples here. It'll create a new folder inside of the pool, and we'll add that to our queue as well. Now from here, instead of bouncing the stereo master, waiting for it, and then doing your stems, and then doing the stems without the effects pass, and then doing your cycle markers, etc. This is saved in the project, and they're there for you, so that whenever you want, you just click Start Queue Export, and that's it. You just let it do its thing, and it'll place all the files in the right folders with all the right formats, all the tracks that you've selected, all the cycle markers you've selected, all in one go. You don't have to do anything else. I don't know of any other DAW that has as much detail worked into their export system as this. And like I said, it's not something that's going to help you create better music, but for me, workflow stuff like this, I hate doing stem exports at the end of a project. If I have to send it to the label to be kept on file for them, it's always a pain, and this is just something that just takes all of that out of the equation completely. So really, really top feature, this. I absolutely love this. I don't think I'll ever be able to go back to not having this again. So let's get out of that, and we can take a look at the next load of features. And we're going to get into the MIDI editor for this. There's a bunch of new updates there as well. Let's check this out. Right, so I've just added a instance of Halion, so we've got something to play around with. And we'll leave the cycle markers there for now, because there's something I want to just take a look at first before we actually get into the scale updates and so forth, and the new automation system for the MIDI parts. I'm going to add in a few extra channels, a few extra tracks here, and these are not the markers. I'm going to add a track, and let's add in a ruler track. We can add in a arranger track. Let's do that, and we'll come back to the chord tracks and stuff later on. And we'll open up our MIDI editor now, and we're going to grab the full screen MIDI editor. What you can do now is those tracks that we've just added, the global tracks, you'll see they're now available here, and we can actually enable those inside of the MIDI editor, which you weren't able to see before. This is super handy to have if you're working with scores and things like that. You want to be able to have your markers up there, points that you want to hit in, let's say, when you're scoring to picture or whatever. The chord tracks as well, they can be displayed here now as well, so you have everything lined up with your notation when you are working with the note editors like this. So let's take a look at some of the new CC data automation. So what they've done is they've kind of implemented the same curve system that you have with the standard automation into MIDI CC data, which is a huge deal for things like pitch bend. Previously, you'd have to draw it in here. Pitch bend was always a problem. The modulation wheel, for example, you could always record that, then extract it in the arrange page as controller data, and then do some modulation or editing of the automation on the arrange page. But pitch editing, the pitch bend, seeing as it's not a CC controller, you could never actually extract that. You would have to do quite a roundabout way to do that. Now, with the pitch editor, you have a range dial here. So if you, this is just for visual purposes, you'd need to actually set up in your synth, let's say you have a 12 range set up in your synth, you can mirror that here. But in this case, our default is 2. We can show the semitones grid so you can see exactly where the pitch bend is going to be. And let's just draw in a few notes here. So that over to velocity. And we can just go and add in some pitch controls here. We'll jump back to the arrow key. Holding down the Alt key will let you add in another node. And you can now drag in curved data for the CC values of pretty much any parameter you can think of. I'll just play that back. So you can do incredibly detailed editing as far as the CC values are concerned now, which is a really nice feature to have that'll lock to your quantize, global quantize as well. And do a nice little tight little curve there. So for scoring, for MIDI editing, super cool feature this. They've also added a number of new features to the scale, or the scale assistant, which is now new in Cubase 11 as well. Let's just get rid of this data that we have here. So let's take a look at the scale data. I'm going to play some stuff in here. We'll just turn auto quantize off, and let's just play something at random. So I've done a recording and I want to find out what scale we're going to be working in. If you select all the notes, you have the option here to choose from the suggestions. This is correct. So we've pretty much played a Aeolian natural minor in A, which is usually interchangeable with C major as well. So that is correct. So we select our scale there. We can also follow the chord track. If you start off with the chord track first, you can select that instead. But now we have a bunch of options here for showing scale note guides and snapping to pitch editing, for example. With the snap enabled, it'll always remain in that scale. And we can turn on the show scale note guides here. If you look at the, we have the event colors. We have velocity currently selected. If we go to scales and chords, they're currently blue now because we have the snap pitch editing on, so it's actually quantizing the pitch every time we pitch that up. The live input as well currently is locked to the current scale that we have set as well. So if I do another recording, I'm just randomly playing keys there. You'll see like F sharp and A flat are giving me a G. It's quantizing the pitches in real time to make sure that they stay in that scale. So I'm going to drop down to the chord editing now as well, so we can show you how they show up when they're out of the scale. So we'll go with a major chord. Let's create a new chord here. Let's add a minor chord. That one's in the scale. Let's go with an augmented chord here. You can see 2 notes of that one are out of the scale there, and 1 out of the scale there. I'm just adding these at random just to show you the quantization features now. So we can see those chords that are out of place. We also have a new feature here as well that works pretty much like the drum editor. We can toggle pitch visibility for events only. So whereas we have all these keys assigned to us now, we can just click that and you'll see it'll condense it to only the notes that have events on them, which is really handy to see when you have pretty complex patterns being played. But let's grab these notes now. We can jump back into the scale assistant and let's just go quantize pitches. And it's now back in the scale that we were working in. So very, very nice, that very handy. And if we wanted to, let's say, go to our chords, start to working with a chord track now, we can just grab those notes, hit create chord symbols, and you'll see it's created a chord track for us now, which incidentally will then be visible if we select it here in the full screen editor, we can see our chords. We can edit these, play around with them, and even apply these to other tracks now, as you have been able to do before. Even audio. So if you have a vocal, for example, and you have your chords laid out here now, you can use Vari Audio to extract MIDI data from your vocals and take vocals that were written for a C major scale and apply that to a D minor scale just by using this scale assistant and quantizing it. It'll actually quantize the audio itself to fit into the scale that you're working in, which is really, really cool. Most other DAWs, you probably need a external plugin to do this kind of stuff. Cubase has a multitude of features as far as scales and chord assistants and stuff go on, and these new additions just make it so much better as well. Really, really nice addition. Right, let's get out of the chord editing stuff. They've also they have actually, before we move on, they have added a few features to the notation functions as well. I'm not a notation guy. I'm not a big fan of music theory, but there are a number of new features to the actual notation on the scoring page as well, which I'm not going to go into detail. The next thing I want to look at, though, is the sampler channels. So let's dive in and we'll check those out. So the sampler in Cubase is, or the track sampler is one of my favorite features in Cubase. I use it so much, and it's so well integrated into Cubase. So quick and easy to get sampled content in and manipulate it. And they've added a bunch of really cool new features to it in version 11. Before I move on to that, another feature that they've added, well, not feature, content that they've added, if I just click home here, we're going to go to loops and samples. They've added a number of new libraries. Now, I've never really explored much of the Cubase built-in content, but I've got to say I had a look at these, and there is some really, really good sample libraries that they've included this time around. Nightcall, which is synthwave sort of stuff, some film textures and atmospheres. Lo-Fi Dreams, great as well. I really, really like the Dance Floor Tech House library. There's some very, very usable content in there. Bloom, less so, it's vocal acapellas, but still some cool stuff that you can use in there. We're going to jump into the new Tech House sample library that comes with Cubase. And let's just scroll down, we'll look for a drum loop. Let's take that one. So we'll just right click and create a sampler track. Let's take a, we'll take a clap sample as well. And the last one, I want to get something tonal in here as well, just to show off a few other features. I'm going to just quickly show you, I mean, this you've been able to do before, but it's just nice to see how quickly you can work with this. We're going to sample an instrument, so resample it. So let's just grab a C of this waveform. We'll bounce that down, right click on the sample, and we'll say create a sampler track. So there we've got a saw wave into our sampler from Retrolog, so we can remove these now. And let's take a look at the various samples that we've got loaded in here to show off some of the new features. I'm going to open up the sample editor in the lower window here, and the first thing we're going to check out is the new playback mode. So as before, you've had the audio warp, but you'll notice next to that we have a slice mode now. Now this is really cool. It's fantastic to have this built in. You can set up your slices by adjusting the threshold. You can even import Rex files. It's now compatible with Rex files directly in the sampler, so you can drop those in. They'll be pre-sliced for you. A couple of different modes that you can select. Now, from here, they are mapped to your keyboard, so you can play them back as a drum kit. Alternatively, what you can do is just grab this little MIDI icon here, and we can just grab that, pop it straight into our track. And now you can mess with the quantization or a number of other different things, maybe trigger these randomly using the logical editor or some of the MIDI modifiers as well. You can also apply envelopes to each one of these as well. So if you want to tighten up a loop like this, for example, we can just go in and adjust our envelopes. Maybe add some drive globally to all of them. So yeah, really nice feature. Very cool that you can load loops in there now, and it's super quick and really well integrated. You can also obviously send this to Groove Agent as well if you want to have a little bit more control. They have also expanded the amount of destinations that you can send stuff to from the sampler channel right here. You'll see you now have, well, we've had Groove Agent and Halion before. We now have Pad Shop and Backbone if you have it. Don't have Backbone, highly recommend you go and check that out. We have a video at Sonic Academy that you can check out. Excellent plugin from Steinberg, and not just for Cubase either. But we're going to come back to Backbone in just a second. Let's take a look at our clap sample. So again, in the amp mod section, another really cool feature that we have now is we can sync to the clock. So say for instance with kicks, I find this really handy if I want to make sure that my kicks are fitting in with the bass line really nicely. You can sync to 16th notes, for example. You can just have a shorten our clap like that. Let's turn on the audio warp, and I'm going to extend this clap quite a bit. Now I want to just show you a really cool feature with this when you start transferring between the sampler track and other instruments. I'm going to send this to Backbone, and you'll see it'll create a new instrument with Backbone in it, but notice that the resynth has actually been turned on automatically. That's because we had the audio warp on. It's actually transferred the audio warp settings to the resynth inside of Backbone, so you can actually play around with this even further. Maybe adjust the purity, go and play with formants, etc. There's a ton that you can do here, but it's really nice that you can kind of start your workflow here, and if at any point you feel like you want to take it further, just a simple click away and it'll set up a new track for you. We'll take a look at that with Retrolog now as well. There's been a couple of updates to the looping. This looping in this sampler for me is still one of the best implementations of a loop function I've seen anywhere. We'll just select continuous, we'll drag our loop and watch what happens. The green part is where the loop occurs. So all it takes is you need to just zoom in a little bit here. You basically just want to line up the waveform with the red and the green together. So this is where the loop starts, and we will just drag this in some more. And if you can get these to line up pretty much like that, you'll get a perfect loop almost every time. There you have it. Seamless and very, very easy to set up. Okay, so we have our multi-sample, or our sampled saw in here. You'll also notice that we now have an LFO, or two LFOs to be exact. So we can jump into our filter, for example. Let's get a filter going, and we can dial up the LFO amount. And we have sync options, either re-triggering or to the beat. Let's go, we'll leave it at 4. We can set up the shape as well. Let's go with an SNH, and really, really nice addition. You have this little bit of extra functionality now. And this can also be transferred, again, like I said, to Pad Shop Pro, which is a really nice feature as well if you're creating more musical content rather than drum samples. And you'll notice it's actually set up the pitch and cutoff assignments. The LFOs are slightly different, but they're already assigned because they were assigned in the sampler. So that's done the same thing here. We can then disable these if we want. And now you have access to all the really cool features inside of Pad Shop Pro, the granular sampler for Cubase. And you can go and create new patches from that. Right, we're going to check out some of the new plugins in Cubase 11. The first one I want to take a look at is Frequency. Now, Frequency is at version 2. They've done an update with this, and it looks fairly similar to what we have before, but you'll notice now that every single one of the bands has a dynamic section. So we can enable dynamic EQ, and the drop-down menu here will give you the compression settings for the dynamic EQ settings for that band. We also have a single mode which we can flick into now, which gives you the EQ band settings plus the dynamics. It's useful to have everything on the same page here. We can then just set up our compression and drag down our node to where we want the compression to end at. And you'll see that band is now dynamically adjusting according to the internal sidechain. Now, with the sidechaining, you also have a new feature in the brand new VST3 format, whereby you can actually select multiple sidechains. I've added in a few other audio channels here, and you can see if we go to our sidechain enable, then click on the input setup, we'll add in audio 1, we can add in audio 2, we can add in audio 3, audio 4, for example, up to 8 different inputs per plugin. So leaving that now, if we go to this one that we had set up here, for example, let's say audio 1, we have a kick drum on, we can go in here, select sidechain 1, we can have that ducking from the kick, and let's say we have a vocal in here as well, we want to cut out some of the mids according to a vocal that's playing. We can enable the dynamics here, sidechain in, and let's grab the vocal, which would maybe be on channel 2. And this is a completely different sidechain signal, so you're getting multiple triggers from multiple tracks inside of the same plugin, which is super cool. Very, very handy when it comes to using this in dynamic EQ mode. So the next plugin that I want to look at is Squasher, which is a compressor or multiband dynamics and distortion unit. This is extremely cool as a sort of creative shaping effect. There's a number of really cool features in here. At first glance, it's very similar to everybody's beloved OTT. It's a multiband compressor which is capable of upward and downward compression at the same time. So you have the amount of compression that you want there, the thresholds for the upward and downward compression, some input and output controls. So yeah, you can adjust the amount of bands, you can switch between the sort of multi-band view and the gain, or the compression for each of them, so you can adjust the upward and downward compression here. It's a nice little visual representation of what's happening. Your crossovers can be changed up at the top here. Let's just drop down this parameter view as well. We've got individual attack, release, drive, and gate settings. So the upward compression, the gate works with that. You can also drive these, so you can use this as a multi-band distortion as well. They're currently linked. And then down at the bottom, once again, you've got side chaining. And again, this works with the new VST3 format. You have 3 different side chains that you can bring in here and send to Squasher, or you can send to a gate as well. And you can bring these in from various different channels. They don't have to be from one side chain source. Again, you can have a kick drum doing that, a vocal doing that, maybe something else doing that one. Now, the last plugin I wanted to look at is Supervision. Supervision is kind of like a modular analysis plugin. You have a number of different modules that you can load here. If you click down this level one, you have loudness, spectrum curve, spectrum bar intensity, all of this stuff to do with phasing, panning meters, surround options as well. If you're into the surround sound stuff, you have an oscilloscope built into this now as well. Look at the wave scope. Wave scope is really, really handy. Something that I wish they'd implemented a long time ago. And you can kind of set these up to your specifications. So we can, it's resizable, this window. We can split horizontally. We can split this one vertically. We can split this one vertically as well. And basically split it as much as you want. And then going into each one of these sections, you can go and select different modules that you would like to have available to you at any given time. And there you have it. There's a number of other settings and stuff that you can play around with in here as far as the duration of, or the sensitivity of the analyzers is concerned. But yeah, this is a really nice addition to have as well. Cubase has always had pretty good metering as far as a RMS and LUFS meterings, etc., in the mixer window or on the control room output. But to have all of these available to you now is also a really, really nice addition as well. So that pretty much brings me to the end of what I wanted to cover. Of course, this being a Cubase update, there's a plethora of other little workflow enhancements, hundreds of little bits and pieces, which I'm not going to cover in detail. There's been numerous GUI updates to things like the inspector window. You'll notice there's a lot of this has been updated graphically, and also some new little features here and there. A couple of the plugins have had updates as well, both functional updates as well as some GUI updates, like Mixer Delay, for example, has a new GUI. You'll see also the Maximizer, for example, now has a GUI that's available inside of this editor here, much like the compressors. Numerous other little things like a brand new logical editor presets. There's a couple of interesting bits and pieces, but not within the scope of this video. You'd have to just go through the release notes and check out if any of those apply to you and what they are. So cool, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy using Cubase 11. I'm pretty excited about it, especially all the workflow updates. Hopefully I will catch you guys again soon here at Sonic Academy. Take care. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!